Hey, what's up guys, my name is Cherno. Welcome to another Hazel devlog. It feels like it's been so long since the last one, and to be honest, it has, because I don't think I've done that much lately. That's okay, because these development logs, as always, are about recapping what it is that I have done, as well as thoughts for the future, and also just my thoughts about the whole process of developing a game engine in general. Now today I want to talk about getting things done to a certain level of doneness or perfection. So in other words, should you leave a feature, let's just say medium rare, or should you get it all the way to well done? As you can see, I'm sitting in the kitchen, so that's probably why these analogies are slightly inspired by food. Now, I recently put up a video called Just Do It, I'll have it linked up there, where I mentioned that done is better than perfect, which is kind of a common term thrown around the industry, any creative industry. What it means is that it's better to get something done and release it and move on to something else, rather than just iterating on the same thing over and over again until you get it to the point that it's perfect. Because, well, for one, that might never happen, but also it's important to recognize that striving for perfection is not always the right move. And today, I'm gonna throw a real curveball into this and talk about the opposite of that, which is more along the lines of spending more time on the same feature to get it done to a higher standard, rather than leaving it where it is and moving on to something new. How do you decide whether or not you're going to spend more time perfecting a feature rather than moving on and doing something new when that feature is more or less there? And I mean, that really is a question. How do you decide? I think this problem really presents itself a lot more strongly when you're working on a large project. So if you're working on a game engine, there is just so much going on that you're never really going to have everything done to perfection. It's just not gonna happen. I mean, look at the other game engines. They're worked on by hundreds of engineers for decades, and they're not done. And so if you're a single person working on a large project such as a game engine, knowing when to stop and knowing when something is good enough before you move on, I think is a really difficult skill to learn, and it's something that you will probably likely screw up with and then come back to and then keep on improving certain features, because you're like, okay, I just can't live with this feature being at this level. And it sucks because I've worked on larger projects. I've seen what large teams are capable of achieving, and it's really cool. It really is amazing. When I was a lot less experienced, let's just say 8 years ago, I really had no idea of the scope of something like a game engine. So when I got something done to a certain standard or to a certain level of complexity or feature completeness or whatever you want to call it, I was happy with it. But now that I've gotten more experience and I know how larger projects are put together, there's always this feeling at the back of my mind that's like, well, I know that this isn't up to the professional standard that I might be used to. I know that this feature is not very good, but I have to leave it there and I have to move on to something else. Otherwise, I'm gonna be stuck writing this feature for the rest of my life, potentially. I mean, to give you a really good example, let's talk a little bit about rendering. Rendering and graphics is my favorite area of programming, or I should say probably game engine development. The reason I started programming in the first place was because I was really into 3D art and I wanted to write my own renderer. And so if we look at Hazel and we look at the state of the renderer in Hazel, I mean, I've been looking at it over the past week and I hate it. I don't hate it because I've written it. I think that for what it is, it's probably not the worst piece of code I've ever written. However, it's just capable of so much more. There's so much more in me that I want to pour into that renderer, because to me, it's total junk. But if I just decided that I was going to focus on Hazel's renderer until it was like more or less, let's just say, nearing Unreal Engine's level, or I shouldn't say that because that's probably impossible, but nearing a more professional level, then that would take me years. And so after 3 years pass, I might have a brilliant renderer that's capable of rendering really nice graphics, and it's written really cleanly, and the code is organized great, and it's extensible, and it supports all the latest features, and it supports ray tracing, and it's amazing. But then I wouldn't have written a game engine. I would just have a renderer, and that's it. But what about, like the entity component system? What about the whole game runtime system? What about C# scripting and interacting with things? What about a level editor so that you can actually place like entities into the world and do stuff with them? None of that would exist, not to mention probably only support one rendering API, one platform, and that's it. There's just so much to think about, and there's so much to do that I find that obviously I have to just cut features short and I have to really, really focus on smaller chunks to get anything done. And I have to make sure that I'm basically, instead of doing like a depth first search, this is one of those great programming analogies again that I just came up with on Spot, like I always do. But instead of like a depth first search where we basically drill down on a feature and we go all the way to the end, we have to do more of a breadth first approach, which is like, okay, let's get like a triangle rendering, and then let's move on to like maybe creating an anti-system or some of the UI for the editor or something like that. We have to approach this whole thing as a whole rather than drilling down on one specific feature. Now, I'm saying we have to. This is just my approach, and this is what's going through my head. This isn't necessarily the way to write a game engine. But if you are doing something like that by yourself, you have to realize how many sacrifices you really do have to make in order to get a game engine more or less feature complete, even if it is kind of at that MVP, minimum viable product, feature level. And to be honest, that's what I've been thinking about this past few weeks. And in a sense, it's absolutely heartbreaking. Apart from the fact that that itself is kind of demotivating, there's also the whole situation going on with where I live. I live in Melbourne, Australia, and for those of you who live here or know about what's going on here at the moment, we are in a pretty serious lockdown. We've got a curfew where we're not allowed to leave the house after 8 p.m. and before 5 a.m. And we're only allowed to travel in a 5-kilometer radius from where we live. I mean, I can't even see my parents. So because of that, I've really been reevaluating what I've been doing. I think I've been looking at games such as Ghost of Tsushima and just spending a little bit more time doing more entertaining things to me. I've been playing a lot of Age of Empires 2 with my friends. That's been a really good way to spend some time socializing with people other than my wife who lives with me, which is I'm really grateful for that. And I've also really enjoyed streaming on Twitch. I mean, being able to share the work that I'm doing with hundreds of people watching the stream and interacting with me, it's amazing. And to be honest, it's the closest thing that I've experienced since I left EA and a real kind of team. And I'm honestly super grateful for all of you. I think streaming is something that I'm definitely gonna do a lot more of in the future. So throughout these past few weeks and all of this thinking about what's going on, and done is better than perfect, but on the other hand, getting stuff done to a higher degree and to a higher level of satisfaction really is also something that I think is important. What I've decided to do is to take a little bit of a step back from Hazel, and instead of trying to get all of the features in at once, which is something that I tend to do and then later I just get overwhelmed, I'm going to take a look at what we already have, because I think that Hazel Dev is at a really good place right now. I mean, you could basically make a game with it. It's got C# scripting, it's got 3D rendering, it's got 2D physics. You can kind of put something together with it. And in fact, that's something that I am going to do soon. On my stream, I want to start building games, building little games using Hazel, using the actual editor, using actual C# scripting without actually going in and programming any C++ code. That's something that I'm really excited to do in the future. And obviously I'll have to add features to the C++ side of things to facilitate a lot of the functionality that's probably missing and that I would like to add along the way, but that's also part of the fun, and that's how we get to a point where Hazel ends up being more feature complete. So taking a look at what Hazel Dev already has and then just refining that, that's something that I'm going to spend the next month or two going over. I am going to go over the renderer and refine it. I'm going to be integrating things like SpurV, which is a shader compiler, which we can also use to compile into various other shading languages, as well as reflect upon the shaders to get information about things like uniform buffers and vertex attribute layouts, because the way that we're currently doing that is just by using a simple GLSL parser that I wrote. That's also going to set us up for multiple rendering APIs and for multiple platforms, which is also something that I'm going to be taking a look at. In the next month or two, I'm going to be taking a look seriously into macOS and Linux support and everything that we need to do to make that happen. I'm going to spend a lot of time polishing what Hazel actually has and lifting that up to a higher degree of quality, just to a higher standard, instead of trying to jam in a whole bunch of new features. And to be honest, I'm really excited to do that, because in a sense, that's a lot easier than trying to learn all these new things and deal with problems you've never dealt with before. It's time to just get back to this and just improve the overall quality of it, and I honestly can't wait to do that. Now, apart from the fact that I will be keeping you guys up to date in these Hazel devlogs, and hopefully next time I'll show some code and all of the actual ways that I've improved the code, I guess. Apart from that, I am also going to be streaming myself doing a lot of this work. Now, in the past, I used to stream myself working on Hazel Dev only for patrons, but I'm not going to be doing that anymore. I'm going to be streaming for everyone on Twitch. Over the past week of streaming on Twitch in general, I found that apart from the fact that it's super cool to have an audience watch you and comment on what you're doing, and it just motivates me to keep going more because I know there's people watching me. Apart from all of that, a lot of you guys are excellent at spotting mistakes or just bouncing ideas off of. Sometimes I'll not know how to do something, or I'll consider doing it a certain way, and I'll be thinking out loud and just talking to you, and someone will suggest that I take a different approach. This happened just last night, for example. But anyway, hopefully that makes sense to you guys, the kind of new direction, I guess, of Hazel Dev. And look, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that maybe I'll polish up some things and then I'll just want to integrate this new feature, and I'll probably will do that. But I guess for me, it's more about realizing that this game engine it's a huge piece of technology, something that I'm really passionate about and that I really want to do well and properly. And so sometimes you just need to go back and do the same thing again and make it better instead of just trying to constantly move forward. Because as you do that tech debt just keeps building up, and eventually it's going to be completely unmanageable, and you're probably going to crash and burn and burn out. And that's not something I want to do, because of course I'm here for the long haul. Anyway, I want to thank all of you guys for helping to support me. This community means a lot to me, and I definitely wouldn't be sitting here making a game engine if it wasn't for you. So I really am grateful to all of you guys. Thank you so much. I want to also mention that I finally have merch. Check this out. To those of you who remember my original streams and how I used to always have a turkey either on the oven or on the stove, I finally have some turkey merchandise. This design was actually made by my wife. I think she did an amazing job. I'll have a link in the description below if you guys want to check this merch out. I'm still kind of refining a few things with it, so things might change. There might be more types of clothing available. We might tweak the design or just resize it in the future. But to those of you who do want to show your support and get this amazing sweatshirt in this case, but I've also got like t-shirts and hoodies and other stuff, thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy it. It really did come out amazing. As always, if you're more interested in the code than the clothes, then check out patreon.com/the Cherno, where you can actually get access to Hazel Dev's source code. And there's actually an amazing team, an amazing small team that's part of the community that I've built up that are helping me make decisions as well as actually contribute to that code, which I think is pretty cool. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you all for watching. Have an amazing day, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.